fight for those things we can't live without, are safe, clean food and water resources. So we fight against the kind of corporate control and abuse of either our food system or our water system. And right now, a lot of the work is around moving the country off of fossil fuels. You know, if we're serious about addressing climate change, we think you need to move to 100% renewables and to do it incredibly quickly by 2035 at the latest. So historically, we've done a lot of work against fracking. We ran a successful campaign to ban fracking in New York, and are working on doing that across the country. Had a big win in Maryland just this year, where they've banned it as well. But now the kind of next phase is really moving to 100% renewables.
So what if people don't listen to you guys? What is the future like that you vision if they don't really tackle climate change?
Yeah, I mean, to us, it's less about, and I think this is kind of what the training here today is about. It's less about elected officials listening to us or us winning the argument with them, and more about sort of building the political power necessary to change their minds, right? So for us, it's less about sort of winning them over in an ideological sense of the word. We think real power comes from the grassroots, so you've got to build that up. And when you do that and can build it big enough, as we did on the fracking ban in New York, you can win real victories even against, even against some of the biggest companies on the planet, the sort of oil and gas industry. So the strategy works. The challenge, right, is scaling it up to a degree where you can win quick enough. And on climate change, there's simply not a lot of time left. So you've got to do it faster.
So that goes to my question. So how are you guys, like, what is the next step for you and your organization specifically?
So for us, there's sort of a two-pronged strategy, right? So ultimately, we've got to move the whole country off fossil fuels. So as you probably know right now, Congress is controlled by Republicans. Obviously, Donald Trump's in the White House, sort of granting the fossil fuel industry its every wish. That said, we need to have a progressive vision out there now. So just recently, we introduced the Off Fossil Fuels for Better Future Act that'll move the country to 100% renewables by 2035. Now, look, we know the Republicans aren't going to pass that, but you need that marker out there because when power shifts, we need to have a bill that has a lot of support from the Democrats, from the left. So that's sort of the strategy on the national level. At the same time, we've got to fight against all the bad stuff that Trump's doing. So, for instance, we're running a big campaign to protect EPA funding, which they're trying to cut by as much as a third. And so far, that has worked. We've held that off. That battle continues. That's all federal stuff, right? At the same time, states like New York can and have to make real progress on climate change, and the fact that we have Trump in the White House makes that more important, not less, right? We have to make progress in states where you still can. Clearly, New York is one of those, right? So much more Governor Cuomo can do, much more that the state legislature can do. So we're going to push for a state bill to do the same thing, to move to 100% renewables even faster by 2030. More importantly, though, or as importantly, there's a bunch of fossil fuel projects the governor has on his desk right now to either approve or deny. If he's serious about being a climate leader, those all have to be denied, right? The first step when you're in a hole is you have to stop digging. So we're hopeful that that's the first thing Governor Cuomo can do to show he's serious. And then after that, we need to do much more to move the state and ultimately the country to 100% renewables.
Okay. So how do you deal with people that like disbelieve the issue and take what like politicians are saying, how it's not a real thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? I think that it's there's this sort of old line that it's difficult to get someone to understand something when their job depends on them not understanding it. And I think for a lot of politicians, that's the case, right? They're sort of listening to the donor class, telling them climate change isn't real, and so they believe it. So to me, it comes back to the same thing. I don't think there's any silver bullet argument that wins that. I think it's the hard work of organizing, of really building political power on the ground in those districts. And that work is happening, right? I mean, I think the climate movement's bigger than it's ever been. We're still not big enough, though. So the challenge to me is how fast you can scale that up. And so that's sort of the work we're invested in kind of day to day.
Is your work only just American-based, or is it like a whole global?
Yeah, so we have a very small international staff. It's largely domestic. We have we're very closely aligned, though, with Council of Canadians, you might be familiar with. They do very similar work in Canada. So Maud Barlow, who's a real hero of the kind of clean water movement, she's the chair of our board, and we work very closely with them. So we don't do a lot of work in Canada because Council of Canadians is doing basically the same work up there.
Okay. So when you created this organization, right, at first, what was your vision? And
Well, I wasn't
has
there
it
at the beginning,
changed?
but
Okay, I'm sorry.
So we come out of Public Citizen. So Food and Water started back in 2005, and Winona Hatter, who's our executive director, and a bunch of the senior staff there, been doing this work, right? This work around food and water issues at Public Citizen. Eventually, that got big enough; it made sense to spin off to its own organization. And so I think at the time, what they were thinking is, we need an organized movement on these issues to protect specifically food and water. There was a time years and years ago where you could maybe just waltz into Congress and sort of make an argument and maybe it would carry the day. That's over, right? So for us, progressive change on the big issues has largely happened because there's been a big organized movement around it, and so that's what we're trying to do. It's not to say you don't lobby, it's not to say that all those things aren't important, but they're not sufficient, right? They're not enough anymore. And so I think over and over again we've seen, especially in the environmental sphere, that when you organize at a grassroots level, you can win. Again, the challenge is just doing it enough, or making it big enough, rather.
Yes, yeah, okay. So is there anything else that I forgot to mention that you would like to say?
I don't think so. I guess what I'd say is if people want to know more, they can go to our website. It's foodandwaterwatch.org. There's also a campaign website for the Off Fossil Fuels campaign. That similarly is offossilfuels.org.
Okay. And well, we know that America has there was a lot of climate issues, like the hurricanes and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, with that, is that something about climate change that you're trying to, or is that like?
Yeah,
sure.
Look, I think
just normal?
For the last many years, we're living through the impacts of climate change, right?
Yeah.
So this weekend in New York, there's a big rally on the 5th anniversary of
Yes,
Superstorm
yeah.
Sandy. New Yorkers know as well as anybody that climate impacts are real to real people, and they're affecting us right now. It's not some distant thing in the future. But certainly that's been the case this fall, right? We've had sort of tragic reminder after tragic reminder that we have to make a real change, that we have to move away from fossil fuels. So, the hurricanes on the East Coast and obviously now tragically in Puerto Rico. But at the same time, we've had just horrific, historic wildfires ravaging the West Coast. So every day you open the newspaper, it feels like there's another in-your-face reminder that climate change isn't just here, but it's causing real harm to real people.
Exactly.
So the hope is that catalyzes the movement.
Yeah.
And I think you are seeing the climate movement step it up a notch, but certainly we're going to have to go a lot farther, a lot faster.
So there's fossil fuels are still like lobbying a lot of money to politicians,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
But there's also like the EV movement going on, and like there's like water hydrogen cell cars and stuff, right? There's like alternative ways, but they're still putting in money, and governments are accepting it. What's the change? Like, is there going to, a lot of people are saying that there's no change because people just want money, right? It's like,
look,
what can we do?
Certainly the power of the fossil fuel industry it's in Congress and around the globe is a gigantic problem, and in fact the problem
Exactly.
holding us back, right? That said, I think that the way you fight back is with people power. In the short term, we're never going to have the money that the fossil fuel industry has. So to oversimplify a little bit, all of these issues boil down to whether our people power is stronger than the fossil fuel industry's money. Right? There are no people in the streets yelling, let's build this pipeline or let's build this fracking well, right? That doesn't exist. Those people aren't there. What they have is a bunch of money, a bunch of lobbyists, a bunch of ads on TV. And so, if you had a ledger, it's like, is that more powerful than our people power? And once you get enough people there, enough people active enough, you can overcome it. So that is a bad place to be in, and the long-term solution is we need real campaign finance reform, both in the U.S. and likely around the globe, and certainly at the state level. But even with the bad system we have, right, we've seen real victories happen. The challenge is making it big enough. But I don't want to underplay the problem that the fossil fuel industry poses, because certainly they've been holding us back for years. And, I think that is tipping now, but we'll see, I guess.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
No problem.
How long are you in New York?
I'm here until